Welcome to the Beyond the Horizons podcast. In this episode, we're breaking from our usual format to bring you one of the keynote sessions from our Business of Security event held last year in Texas. Here, Enable Chief Security Officer Dave MacKinnon explains why selling security isn't enough, and instead how MSPs need to turn their focus to selling business resilience as an outcome.
This guy needs no introduction, but I am going to let him introduce himself.
I'm him. So like I said yesterday, so Dave MacKinnon, CISO here at Enable, been here for about 3.5 years. I was actually thinking about it last night. I've actually built MSPs before. So yeah.
You just figured this out?
Well, I forgot I did it. So obviously ran the SOC and IR at AT&T. Prior to that, I actually worked at Cofense, which was PhishMe. Built out the Phishing Defense Center, which was a service offering they had for like malicious email analysis tools. So
really,
yeah, I don't know. So I've been in security forever. I'm not in sales, so I just want to preface this with, I don't sell. I don't know how to sell. I don't want to sell. This is more just a conversation and maybe a little bit of a gripe session. So
yeah, well, that's important. Actually, it's funny. We're gonna rabbit trail right now. Because I was actually going to say, I think you're one of the best security salespeople I know. Because you successfully sell security across, that's literally your job. You sell not the products, you sell the concept across the entire ecosystem.
I sell the benefit. I don't sell security. I don't view my job as John here. I don't know if yeah, but how many products could you name that I go buy? You don't have to answer. Yeah, exactly. John has no idea. And that's not a bad thing. He doesn't need to know.
That's the point.
That is the point.
Yeah.
I explain, and to me, that's kind of the important approach to this. I sell what we want to do to protect our business.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, and like even yesterday, Chris, I'm sorry, but you had the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad you had listed as risk, and that's bullshit. Risk is not bad. Risk is healthy. Because you acknowledge it. If you stick your head in the sand and say, I don't have risk, I don't have these things, it's never, how many of your customers say this is never gonna happen to me? Like, it drives me absolutely nuts. If you ask John, you will say, it's not if, it's when. And when it happens, our job is to make sure we minimize that impact to our organization.
Yeah.
But you only do that if you sit down and actually understand what that risk looks like.
So the title of this was Stop Selling Security.
Correct.
So what are we selling?
Resiliency.
Resiliency.
That's how I view it. So when I think about what all of you guys do, and you do it better than any small business can do, and that's why you're experts in the field, that's why you're successful, you enable a business to be successful. Especially now with like the transformation to everything's digital, everything's online, SaaS is everywhere. Companies need you in order to be successful. And you're not going in and saying, okay, go buy EDR, or I hope you're not. You're saying, hey, I want to make sure that you don't lose X machines due to, I'm preventing this, whether it be a ransomware. And I know everybody talks about ransomware. EDR is so much better than that. Like we were talking yesterday about, when you talk about threat actors, like tradecraft, from a threat perspective, is a commodity now. Like,
yes.
These tools, you go back 20 years ago, I'm definitely dating myself, and you look at like all these things that the threat actors had, and it's like, all right, China has these tools. You can go rent them now. Like, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need shit tons of money. You don't need to be a developer. You don't have to have, all you have to have is access, and there's tons of access. And that's where I think EDR is not just we're going to stop ransomware. It's as these different attacks come through, as their tactics change, we're keeping up with the threat landscape to protect your business and keep it resilient.
Yeah.
And we have a plan for if you have a crash, which is going to happen. Like, anybody here use CrowdStrike? Nobody. One hand. Yeah, that's cool. But I didn't view the CrowdStrike issue as a security issue.
It wasn't.
It wasn't. It was a BC issue.
Yeah.
I mean, so that was, and like Delta was horrible. I was pissed at their response. But Delta going, well, it's CrowdStrike's fault that we were offline. We couldn't book these people. I'm like, well, that's bullshit. You guys know what these systems are. You have to understand how to bring that back up and online. If it's critical for your airline to function and you don't have a DR plan, That's a business failure.
CrowdStrike shined a light. I mean, if you think about the goals of the enterprise versus the MSP, like CrowdStrike shined a light in terms of the fracturing of lack of resiliency plans across the globe.
A large number of companies.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I very much view, like from an MSP perspective, you're not coming in, I hope you're not coming in going, oh, you need to go buy this security solution. This is how and I think Christian did a great job of this yesterday talking about, we have a stack. This is what our stack does. Do your customers know what you use Enable? Probably not. They have no idea who we are, nor should they. And I think that's the healthy approach, because you're not selling security, you're selling what you want their business to be, and that's fault tolerant, resiliency, able to continue them making money, because that extinction event is what I would guess every business owner is worried about, especially when it comes to technology, because they don't know it. Like my brother owns a small business. Like he does not know, I love my brother. He's amazing. He has amazing skills, but he knows shit about technology. He knows his iPhone, his tablet, and AutoCAD. Like those are his 3 areas of expertise. But if you were to be like, oh, hang on, I need to make sure that we're doing this, 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 and this, he'd be like, I don't care, Dave.
Yeah.
Like they don't care. I was his IT guy for years. We bartered whiskey. It was a wonderful, wonderful barter. But he finally outgrew me, which he should have. But he doesn't care about all those pieces. Now he has a company, I'm guessing at MSP, I don't know which one, that does these things for him. But that's his view of the world. Like I just need it to work.
So when you think about how you wake up and think about security at the enterprise layer, and as you're hearing the goals and you talk to partners in your time here at Enable, what do you see as like where's the delta that should exist, and where should convergence happen as an MSP thinks more like an enterprise in terms of approaching resiliency?
Yeah, so I think part of it is figuring out where you want that North Star to be for your organization. So like we use COBIT internally, like we sit down, we kind of map out all the, and I view security as a service. Like I deliver a service to the organization, I deliver that same service to all of you here. But we decide what that North Star is. So we meet, for those of you who don't know, like we have a cyber committee at the board level, and we meet every quarter. Now, John, cover your ears. I was scared to death the first time I met with these people because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Like, truthfully, board presentations were not my strong suit. But what we sat down and we've done with them is we started with 30 minutes. We realized very quickly that now we meet for an hour and a half every quarter, and we talk about this is where the business North Star is. This is what we're working towards. Here are the enterprise risks that we're trying to address.
Let me back you up real quick. You said the business North Star. Mm-hmm. You didn't say the IT, technology, security North Star.
No.
So you start with the business North Star.
Business goals, yeah.
Business goals.
If we go to a business, then my budget is shit. Like, okay. I don't get a budget.
So you start with the business goals.
Totally.
I just wanted to clarify that. Mm-hmm. Continue.
Yeah. But we basically measure, these are the investments we're making.
Yeah.
Again, whether it's Splunk, hey, we're going to increase our spend on Splunk because we're going to be pulling in this additional data. We're building this new product. But we don't get into the nuance of, oh, I need Splunk. It's just we're going to increase our logging and monitoring and enhancements there, and exactly where we want to mature. And we lay that out for everything, whether it be like pen testing or like code scan. And I don't know. You kind of pick all the again, it's all services. I can give you guys 100 services we run as security.
Yeah.
But where we're tracking to that, what risk exists to the business if we don't do it? And at the end of the day, like John tells me yes or no on my budget. He usually says yes. You do a great job with that, boss. But John ultimately says yes or no, and if I don't basically present it effectively, he's going to tell me no.
Yeah.
Or we accept the risk, and that's where I think risk is healthy. You can. I was talking to somebody yesterday about like a dentist's office. They were saying, I work with dentists, and it's funny. Dentists are the one. Anybody else here have dentist offices where they notoriously do not invest in security? I hear it from everybody.
I had dentists.
Yeah. It's like, it's the worst, and I'm sitting here going, all right, but if you think about a dentist's office, all of their technology is electronic. Like when I go to the dentist, I check in with an online system, I get a text message that says, hey, you need to be here on this day. They pull up all my old x-rays on a computer, they put the new x-rays in there, like everything revolves around technology in that space. So I'm going, I would think if you want to go back to old school and just like scrape teeth and actually have no idea what that patient is or who's going to be in it, like it's critically important to that business.
Yes, it is.
But that specific vertical doesn't invest there. But I think it's understanding what motivates them. Like what motivates that business? What does that business owner get up and worry about for his business for that day? How do we make sure that, because if I told John, I want to go spend $5 million on, I don't know, a vending machine that popped out, security information pamphlets to our staff. He could, Dave, you're stupid. And I'd be like, but John, everybody can walk by and get a pamphlet. It doesn't fix our risk. I mean, like it doesn't do jack for us.
Yeah.
And John should turn that down. Versus if I go, John, we need to make a multi-million-dollar investment in a new MSP. I'll use that as an example. We have one. We're going to move to this other one. Here's why we're going to do it. He doesn't need to know the name. He needs to know the why.
Okay.
And how is that going to help our business and candidly our customers stay safe? And that's how I approach it all constantly.
That makes a lot of sense. So before we move on to the next topic, which you've already started to kind of touch on, which is objection handling, you saw a tabletop yesterday, and you saw the responses come up, right, on the screen. Being real, when you think about enterprise versus the responses you saw coming from the MSP community in this room, how much work internally does this room have to do on their processes and their responses and their internal security if you were consulting as a CISO to the companies in this room?
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer because part of it is you're agreeing kind of en masse as you're sitting at that table.
Sure, but you saw some of the outcomes.
So some of it is different MSPs have different resources internally. So some of it would actually be level setting, like what do we have, who do we have. I think some of it is understanding and it was actually the conversation from yesterday. What are you better off building internally versus buying? I mean, do you need to invest in? Like we invest in. I have an incident response team. But I also invest in IR retainers. Like we pay every year for an IR retainer just in case we have something. And if we don't burn that money, we actually use it for different security services. So like for this year, we converted those dollars over to our SOAR automation. Like we've got a bunch of hours that we just took the IR retainer, we didn't use any of it, so we turned it into SOAR hours. So there's also opportunity for you to kind of spend internally and figure out how do you want to use that to mature. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I guess part of what I took away is a mistake most people make during incidents. I make it too. So I'm like, this is not me finger pointing. Is everybody says what they think, not what they know, and that is a critically important piece to discern. When I don't go to John and go, John, I think we're having this issue, and I think we should do this is what I know. I may tell him a little about what I suspicions I have, but if I don't tell him what I know, he can't make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I saw yesterday, and there was definitely questions coming back, which is good. It's healthy. You guys were asking for clarification because you wanted to speak with authority. But in terms of figuring out what you're going to do, some of it is flying by the seat of your pants, and that does happen. Like I've lived part of a good chunk of my career flying by the seat of my pants. But part of it is figuring, that was the intent, was to figure out as you come out of that, before you go consume some alcohol and forget about it, to figure out what do you need to add to your business for when something like that happens. I mean, that was the doomsday scenario. And I get it. I'm sure it was scary. It would be scary for me if we were to play it out where it was Enable's fault, like the Kaseya event. And I'm not picking on Kaseya, by any means, because security is a team sport. We all fuck up, but
it's true.
But that's my doomsday scenario.
Yeah.
If we were to be the ones who were proliferating ransomware to everybody at one time, and that's what we tabletop. That's what we go through. How do we shut things down? What kill switches do we do? What do corporate comms look like? How do we add containment steps? Somebody asked me yesterday, could you actually stop the jobs? And I'm like, yes, we actually know we can. So part of it is, I can't definitively say where everybody needs to grow, but I do hope everybody kind of took away all right, these are some of the foundational pieces we need to add into our business, whether it be technology, whether it be people, whether it be training, whether it be, again, even just reinventing the wheel. Lewis had a bunch of resources out there for
those CISO tabletops, running them on internally.
SANS has a bunch of great cheat sheets that they provide for free. So if you're all right, I don't actually know what steps I should take to investigate a server compromise. Well, they have a sheet for that. Like having that downloaded and at least knowing the basics to ask.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't jump into doing tabletops again. Maybe you start with, okay, I need an IR plan, or I at least need to understand the escalations. Do I have everybody's cell number? Like, I was talking to somebody yesterday, we were talking about, if I have to notify all my customers, how do I do it? What do I do? Like, what if I can't get to my CRM system to actually call all of them? Like, am I gonna pick up the phone and go through my call logs, or, do you have contacts?
So thinking about like a PR plan, an
Exactly.
IR plan, and then retest it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I think everybody's gonna be at a different level of maturity. Tabletops, the one thing I will say, and I didn't say this yesterday, do not do a tabletop that's so difficult that people get pissed off and don't want to do it. Like, come in very intentionally and understand what your goals are. And typically I have 2 or 3 goals. Like, last year when we did our tabletop, one of our goals was we had, because we're publicly traded, we have the materiality disclosure for the SEC. It went into effect last December. So we have basically, materiality is completely subjective. That's the pain in the ass about materiality. It's like, is this material? Would a reasonable investor need to know? I don't know. Like, I don't know if investors are reasonable. But like being able to go through and test that for us was one of my goals.
Yeah.
Like, but I only had 3, and we went through those things. So I think the other aspect of this, if you do take this home, is to figure out how do we come into this in a way that it's not the end of the world, worst experience ever. For the folks who are going through it.
Yeah.
And then you build upon it. Like, you figure out where those gaps are in your program. And so everybody's going to be at a different spot. There is no perfect, true North Star. Everybody has different budgets and things like that. But I do think there's a business tolerance to say, this is where you need to be this tall if you want to, to feel comfortable with where your business is going. And that's a bit of a different, that's how I view it, like from a security perspective. Like, if I bought every tool I wanted, we wouldn't buy anything else. I mean,
Sure.
Like, we wouldn't have any other money. My budget would be, $100 million, and I'd have all the coolest tools, but would we be more secure? And I can't honestly say we would be.
Well, I think we talked about that a little bit yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes the depth and the sheer sprawl of tools that we see sometimes in MSPs that are, they're trying to add all these things, and they're adding value. They're telling their client they have all these tools, but in reality, they're working with small teams that you can't train on everything, and you can't run everything operationally. So like Christian said yesterday, he's like, train your team on a smaller subset of tools and use them really well.
And not all tools work the way they're advertised. I mean, that's what.
Really?
Except for Enable, we're fucking awesome. No, I mean, and that's part of the problem we have is you go buy something. It's like, oh yeah, the salesperson, like, they ramp it up, like, it'll do all this shit. It's awesome. You're like, great. And then you get it home, you unwrap it. You're like so excited to use your new toy. And you're like, oh, it's broken. And that's part of the other problem. And especially like some of the tools we're buying, like, we're making 12-month commitments and we realize they suck.
Yeah.
So we are very critical when we evaluate tools, like crystal clear. I will tell everybody here, because I tell my vendors this, I'm not scared to kick a tool out. At all. Like, I actually encourage it with my team. We need to take hard looks at the technology we're investing in to make sure that, one, is like the market changes constantly. So especially in security, like, it's stuff we need to stay on top of. 2, security is great because they've all moved to these annual models where instead of buying a perpetual license, you buy the subscription, which means you pay 100% every year, which sucks. And they never get cheaper. So we are constantly looking at, are they bringing the value we expect? Now, the cost is, when we make the switch, it's a people cost, it's a business transformation cost. Like, there's all these ancillary costs.
Obviously, you want to pick you're picking a product with a multi-year horizon.
Exactly.
You're not thinking in 12-month intervals.
But we do pretty constantly look at, especially now we're 3 years in, like, is this the right tool? And should we keep using this? And at the end of the day, what value is it adding versus what cost versus what do we want it to do, or do we need to pivot? Like, so
being very intentional about those decisions.
Very much. Yeah.
So before we move on, I have something I've been thinking about over dinner last night, and I'm kind of curious for the room. How many here view SaaS applications as in scope for your responsibility?
You weren't asking me.
I knew the answer you were going to give me. So if you didn't put your hand up, I have a personal challenge to you. Rethink that. Start thinking about SaaS applications as in scope and responsible. Start thinking about identity as one of the most important things that you provide your customers. Because if you centralize identity and centralize single sign-on and all the things that you do and provisioning and all the other pieces, and you put that as in scope, when you're onboarding a new employee for one of your clients, et cetera, in the playbooks, you're automating processes of integrating them to SaaS applications and part of the onboarding workflow, but also you're controlling security and helping them. So John, really quick, we don't have a ton of time, but why did you raise your hand? Why are SaaS applications your responsibility?
They make our business run, period.
Okay.
I mean, that, or we would not be successful with that, like, whether it be Salesforce.
But how, I mean, you can't control Salesforce's security operations.
No, but I can control how we integrate into it. So one of the things, so just background, you know a bit about how our team is architected. So I have a team of security architects. One of the things they do is determine what does that good integration look like, or secure integration. So we develop standards for all these things. So if you want to go buy a tool, I don't dictate the SaaS tools we can and can't. Well, I do actually, but I'm not supposed to. Like, vendor risk management is separate, but when we do those integrations, we say this, whether it be least privilege, whether it be MFA, like most of them, we want intra integration and things like that. But if they don't, MFA, what type of data is it handling? Does it require us to add them to our data? Or GDPR shit. Sorry, I'm drawing a blanket.
No, you're fine.
But
GRC stuff.
Yeah, all GRC stuff. But so we have a hand in not just evaluating the vendor, but also making sure that we're using it in a secure manner. And also, if and when and somebody asked yesterday, what do you do about SaaS apps when there's a security incident? Like, when they have an incident and our data is impacted, we have to have a plan.
Yeah.
So making sure that we have that baked in. If we don't know about it, we're already at a disadvantage. So I very much view our job is to make sure that we're picking secure vendors, trusted vendors, and we're integrating in a way that secures, our employees, our customers, whoever's data we're dealing with.
Well, thanks for that. And I would just say you can monetize this, guys. If you're not monetizing managing identity and SaaS applications for your clients and rolling that into your scope of work and the review work required and telling your customers they can't onboard something new unless you're part of the process, then you're missing out for what it's worth.
I would argue identity is the most critical thing to secure.
Absolutely.
Like, I talked about this in Empower a couple years ago.
It was the first time I'm like, the CISO of Enable is going to talk, and then you just came out and said, please do this.
But it's like, that is where the power is in the organization.
Yes.
Because everything's SaaS first, cloud first, everybody's kind of moved that way. It is like, it's the basic blocking and tackling that's a pathway into everybody's enterprise. Like, I don't know how many times I heard yesterday, like, talking about BEC and this and that. Like, everybody has access into these enterprise applications, and that's where, like, RBAC and everything else is important. So I do think it's not just identity; it's making sure that you are provisioning users correctly. You're keeping and then doing reviews. Like,
absolutely. Well, it's also a cost thing, right? These SaaS applications are very expensive. And if you think about like Datadog and some of the other bigger enterprise tools to monitor that, we can, as MSPs, we can scale that down and help our customers manage cost for licenses that don't need to be used and things like this, right? All right, objections. This matters. So we're going to do objection and Q&A. So when you said earlier you don't sell security, but you do, because he has to approve your budget.
He walked out.
He walked out. He left us. All right. Well, good. Now we can say anything you want.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'll tell you guys the truth.
So objection handling, like, let's think about the things you heard in the room, the things you heard in the last 24 hours. MSPs have clients objecting all the time to stuff. I was at a table and somebody said, well, we're kind of we sound like insurance agents selling risk and helping people with risk. And I think that's kind of true.
It is true.
So you said risk is good. We have clients that don't understand their threats. There's people in the room who can't even sell EDR into their customer base. How do you deal with that?
So who here has insurance? Personal insurance on your vehicle. I want to see every hand go up if you don't. Now, everybody keep your hand up. If you don't have, or if you have the minimum insurance coverage on your vehicle, keep your hand up. Everybody else, drop your hand. Christian, you have the absolute minimum insurance coverage on your vehicle? No. Exactly. What? But what? But But hang on, so why do none of you keep the absolute bare minimum for your insurance? You don't think about it. Exactly. You know that you're personally liable for if you hit another vehicle and you have $10,000 worth of cover. And I don't understand like uninsured motorist coverage and all that's bullshit, and we can get into that another day. But you guys don't think about it. Like when you go to your insurance agent, the insurance agent says, this is what you need to be secure in driving your vehicle and protecting yourself, your assets, all those things.
Yeah.
It's the same conversation you have with a customer. Like the insurance agent isn't sitting there going, oh, well, hang on. You should really worry about this specific line item in the policy. They're gonna say, okay, do you want rental reimbursement? Yes or no? Like, the reason you would want that is if your car breaks down or gets hit or whatever, they're gonna pay for it for a certain amount of time. To me, security is the same thing. Like we are having the conversation about what do you want your environment to be able to persist?
Yeah.
Is it a catastrophic outage of, and I'll take, Austin had it a couple years ago for anybody here who was local. Like they had a huge ice storm. Everything here shut down. Nobody could go to the office. Like, fuck COVID. I mean, like we went through COVID. I took a SOC at Warner. We took the SOC at Warner from in person in Atlanta, everybody in every day, to remote in 4 days. And I was convinced, of a few things. One, we'd be back in a few weeks. Two, it would be a catastrophic failure. And I was wrong on both of those things. We were gone for like 2 years, but it was a booming success. And it's because the business was resilient to the fact that we could support, and we had to increase pipes and all these other things. But when you're talking to a business about what their business goals are, security is not that conversation. It's risk. The business owner is going to find if they say, if I lost every computer, I don't give a shit. Somebody who, I don't know who said it yesterday, they were talking about, I don't have anything valuable.
Yeah, that's common. People hear that.
And that is, I think it's hilarious. So I was, years and years ago, I was with one of the big Major League Sports management company, I don't know, it was the NBA. So I was talking to them, and they said, well, we don't have anything valuable. I said, no shit. I was like, so when you guys do an expansion team, wouldn't it be awesome to know what cities you're thinking at? Because then I would actually know where you might be building an arena. And if you're building an arena, then as a threat actor, I could actually go buy that property. And then when you want to go buy it back from me, I could make like a 10x on my investment. And they go, okay, well, maybe it's a little bit valuable. I'm like, everybody has something valuable. I don't care if it's your patience. I don't care if it's the IP behind what you're building. It could be the designs for, everybody has data that's valuable. If you didn't have something that was valuable, you would not be a company. Like, and I think kind of helping them to understand where their value is in their organization, and you guys know it. You know what makes their wheels turn inside their business, and helping them see where that value is. That's where they will understand the risk and what they can accept and not accept. And then it moves away from, because it shouldn't be security. It shouldn't be, oh, you should buy EDR. It should be, okay, we're going to make sure that your systems stay in line because we want to minimize the chance of you, like, what do you lose? How many people know how much one of their customer loses a day if they're offline entirely? Some of you guys do. Yeah. Like, that's a great conversation.
Those are super valuable conversations.
They are hugely powerful.
And having deep conversations about how long they can sustain being fully down, right? Number of days.
Yep.
That's kind of like the rental thing.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're saying, like, do you want a rental car? Because your brain is automatically saying, well, if I don't have, I have 3 cars, so I don't need rental car coverage because if one of my cars gets totaled, I got 2 others I can drive. If you have 2 cars and a busy family and 2 people that work, like maybe that rental coverage is really important.
What if 2 cars have an accident?
Yeah. What if, right? But you're making that risk management,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're constantly doing that. You can walk owners through the same thing in terms of like number of days they can afford to be down, what they can minimum viable recover from. If it's a machine shop, talk about like, okay, your 2 CNC machines are offline. Like you still have email, but those are down for 5 days. Mm-hmm. Are you good with that? Like, does that work for you? And if they're like, honestly, yeah, because we run jobs on those, like we could offload those to a guy down the street. They're no big deal. Now your case has to adjust, mm-hmm. right? Because you're helping them manage risk. And it's not always what you want. Sometimes you have to really work with the business goals.
Yeah, and it's also understand, like you use the CNC machine. This is like my brother's wheelhouse, but like, what does that stack up beyond that? Like it's that recovery is not just when you're back online. You also have that week of lost productivity, all your other deadlines slide out. Right. Like that becomes a huge
Just
challenge to
walking
a
through
business
scenarios.
to run through, okay, well, hang on, understand, yes, you get the computer back, but you just lost a week of revenue, or
That's
you've
right.
lost, or you have pissed off, like I'm gonna use my dentist because like my dentist is notoriously hard to get into for a cleaning. So if I miss a cleaning, I almost want to change dentists because it's a pain in the ass. That she ended up just hiring another hygienist because I think she was having fallout. But having that conversation of this is your business impact, this is the resiliency we're trying to build into it. You're not talking about security anymore.
And if you get them to tell you, if they won't, because you can't just say how long can you be down, but if you say, okay, so theoretically you're down 2 weeks, how does that feel? Uncomfortable? Let's come back, and then we systematically start building a risk plan to get them within a range of comfort.
But that's where you do a BIA. Like you do a business impact assessment to understand, here's your critical systems, here's from a recovery perspective, what we need to make sure we're backing up, that we need to make sure that we're able to recover in a certain amount of time. Like that is where you actually have that conversation of understanding this is what makes your business run.
So you're starting with the business, you're thinking about business objectives and goals, you're not talking about tools.
Correct.
You're managing to risk and you're embracing risk. And even at a large enterprise, you're accepting risk.
Yes.
So as an MSP, as owners, we're going to help our owners together accept risk.
Yeah, you should accept risk. Jeremiah and I were talking about this, he stepped out too. We're talking about this at breakfast. Like we at Enable accept risk all the time. And the classic example I'll give you is AWS. We run Nsight, N-Central, a bunch of tools out of AWS. We have a risk acceptance in our risk ledger that says we are not going to port those products over to Azure.
Yeah.
Because we'd have engineering and all these other things, and we accept that. We accept it annually.
Yes.
My argument has always been, well, if AWS goes down, half the internet goes down. We've already experienced that when S3 goes down.
Exactly.
And the business has that risk tolerance.
Absolutely.
But that's a conversation we needed to have.
And you put it on the table,
Exactly.
You document it, you all look at it together and say, we accept it. And as an MSP owner, by the way, it's okay for you to tell your customer, okay, I'm sure insurance agents would do this all the time, right? If they could let anybody write their policy level to lower limits, people would do it. Whereas insurance agents thankfully have regulations to tell them what their minimums are, right? But ultimately, your job is to set that minimum threshold, that too tall to ride that we keep hearing, and you have to hold to that, or don't be a victim in that, right? If you don't want clients that have a lower level, don't accept those clients, or don't accept the answers when you go back to your current customers. Get them to that, and then from then on, it's about risk management.